Hello, everyone. My name is Brianna Blooms-Cavera. I use she, her pronouns. I am the organizer of Middletown Pride and the chair of the City of Middletown's LGBTQI+ Commission. Thank you for joining us tonight for the space between free speech and hate speech. Our guest is Captain Brian Hubbs. Captain Hubbs, would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Captain Brian Hubbs from the Middletown Police Department. He, him. I am the Professional Standards Division Commander and the Public Information Officer for the City of Middletown's Police Department.
What do those roles entail?
My division commander role actually entails, we actually do all of the hiring, all of the training for the agency, any civilian or internal complaints that come in against officers. We handle all the investigations with those. We're responsible for recruiting, et cetera. My role as a public information officer is a little bit different in that I'm basically available for dissemination to the public of any information that becomes public, like such as major car accidents or large-scale events, et cetera.
Thank you. And I guess let's just jump into the meat of the conversation.
Sure.
So what is the distinction between First Amendment protected speech and hate speech?
So in the state of Connecticut, it's a little unique. I'm not sure about other states, but the state of Connecticut specifically, hate speech in itself is not necessarily a criminal act. It constitutes First Amendment rights. The difference between what might be considered hate speech is when it's actions such as intimidation or harassment that now cross a threshold that start to be the prime motivation for bias against a protected class of individual.
Okay. So in general, speech on its own, even if it has hateful rhetoric or is insulting to a protected class of citizen based on religion, gender, sexual orientation, other statuses, the speech is still just speech.
Correct. The speech in and of itself is not criminal. It's a First Amendment protected event. When it starts to transition over into action is where we really start to get involved as a law enforcement agency.
What does that, when it transitions into action, what does that mean?
It basically means there's a criminal act. So if there is in and of itself something that's rude, and I often, not to be callous by any means, but I often refer to it as, the sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. When it's simply just name calling, and it's something that is speech we hate, and it's speech that probably is very rude and is certainly condescending in many ways, it's not until it transitions over to an intent to specifically harass someone, cause fear in someone's heart, start to become an assaultive behavior. It's times like that, that's when we actually correlate the speech prior or during as it relates to hate crimes, because now a criminal act has been committed.
So the speech in of itself is not a crime. It can be spiteful. It can rise to the level of being personally offended and emotionally distraught. Someone could call me every slur under the sun. But if they're just saying it to me, that in itself is not a hate crime. But if they commit a crime against me beyond that, if their speech was based on a protected class that I'm a part of, then it might be considered a more serious crime than just a normal crime. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. It could either be a separate and distinct crime that could be classified as a hate crime. It could be, and we refer to it as being like an escalator in terms of sentencing guidelines. So when it's a protected class, that that's being added to the criminal event.
I guess the question then is, for a person who is in public and who is being insulted, and understanding the insults may be not based on identity, or it may be based on identity, how would that person, the target of those insults, know whether a crime is being committed or if they should call a public safety agency?
I mean, I guess I would never discourage anybody from calling at any time. I mean, if they're fearful for their safety, I encourage them to call. We're not everywhere at all times, so be patient. We're going to respond as quickly as we can. If you're in fear for your safety, it might be something that you have to have a conversation with the officer when he or she arrives to say this is the actions that have occurred. Is this something that has risen to a criminal element? And then they can evaluate it together. They can evaluate it based on the merits on a case-by-case basis. There's obvious ones, things out there. Assault is obviously a criminal act. Throwing things at someone, like violent, tumultuous behavior is what we typically refer to it as. When you have violent behavior, you can almost be rest assured it is going to automatically elevate to a criminal event. If it's something that's a question or you're not sure, my suggestion would be to walk away and find a safe place to call us, but walk away and call us so that we can do an evaluation with you.
Working under the understanding that, again, hateful speech in itself is not a crime, and we're really actually talking about when someone starts acting in a way that becomes threatening or criminal in nature. Mm-hmm. I'd like to just talk through some scenarios then. So I am on the sidewalk. There is someone near me, and that person starts insulting me. Might not be because of my identity, might just because they don't like the color of my hair or the cut of my jib. Mm-hmm. What should I do in that circumstance? There's this person, we're both on the sidewalk, they are insulting me cruelly.
Simply walk away. We in Connecticut, we don't have a stand your law ground per se. We don't have a freedom of being offended where we should be free of the bias-based criminal activity. But if someone is simply insulting you, the best suggestion and probably the legal expectation is simply just walk away, try to avoid any further confrontation. Obviously, if this person is exhibiting signs of mental health or mental illness, that might be a public safety concern, I would recommend someone report that so that we can respond and do an assessment or an evaluation. But if it's just a simple, as you kind of described, just someone doesn't like the cut of your jib, like that's not going to be criminal in itself, just walk away.
What if, while that person is insulting me, they say that I am going to hit you, or I'm going to attack you, or I'm going to effing kill you?
So that's where it becomes a clear-cut violation of the law. So you can pretty much be free to say what you want, but you never have the right to be free to threaten someone's safety. So that would be a circumstance. I would still recommend trying to get away. I would encourage trying to go into a public space, maybe a local restaurant or, somewhere that might be open that has, a lot of people available as witnesses. Trying to get away and trying to protect yourself is the first and foremost, but that would be something that escalates to a criminal event, and then you can report that to public safety or to the police department.
Okay, so if I'm being insulted, it's not something that a law enforcement agent may be able to help me with in that moment. If I'm being threatened, I should remove myself as quickly as possible, go to a safe location, and call public safety. How would I, at that point, do I call 911 or do I call a non-emergency number? Someone has just threatened me in public.
So I guess it really it's a depends moment. It's a depends answer. So if you're still being followed, if you're still in direct fear that person is, in your close proximity where, he or she could launch an assault at any given time, then I would say 911 would be appropriate. Now, it's like an immediacy that, you need to get it reported, you need to get an officer started to your location. If this is something that they've made the threat, but they're no longer following, or you're in a safe location, I mentioned like a restaurant. If you walk into the restaurant, now you're safe and employees are ensuring that you're safe and they're like, yes, we've got you, let's go ahead and call the police, then it would be the routine number. It's no longer, an emergency per se. It might feel like an emergency to you, but it's no longer a 911 appropriate emergency. You just report it, and we'll get somebody out there as soon as possible as well.
I think in some cases, I know I might freeze in the moment and not know if it's an emergency or not. Is it okay for us to err on the side of this is an emergency and I should call the emergency number if we feel threatened?
The only time that it's inappropriate to call 911 is when it's evident or you've been told it's not an emergency. We do have people that sadly will misuse or abuse the 911 system for, loitering complaints, or someone was littering or something like that. Might, common sense might dictate that that is not an actual true emergency. Something that is like we're talking about where someone is following you, they're making insultive, type of statements, they're, they're being aggressive in nature, I would never suggest that the use of 911 is inappropriate. At that point, you feel like it's an emergency, go ahead and use it, and we'll vet the process, we'll vet the call for service, and we'll respond accordingly.
And so it's also, I think, worth noting that this is all just if someone's threatening us with violence. If violence actually occurs, we immediately call 911 as soon as humanly possible.
Absolutely.
If we are in a position where it is not an immediate danger or we don't feel like we're about to be physically attacked, is it okay for us, as we're being targeted by these insults, to record the incident?
Absolutely. So, well, let me preface that. As long as you're in a position where you have the lawful ability to do that. So anything that's a public space, and this is often misinterpreted across the board, so it's probably a good avenue or venue to discuss this. If you're in a public space, i.e. the street, on the sidewalk, even a public restaurant, if you're in a place that you have a legal right to be, anything that you can see in your view is something that in the state of Connecticut, you can legally record. So I'm a firm believer, and after 28 years in this profession, I will tell you that anytime we have evidence to support a victim's statement, it makes it so much easier for a law enforcement official to take action, because what you're describing to me is then also what is relayed or documented on, thankfully with the advent of cell phone cameras, right? So that's something that if we have the ability to listen to your version of events and then confirm your version of events, you are now a credible witness, you're a credible victim if you've been victimized, and it helps us with our probable cause to make an arrest. Where it actually, so it would be imperative, especially with someone with erratic behavior, I would say almost, if you have the ability to do so safely, if you're not comfortable doing it so overtly that, you have your phone out and you're pointing at them, even if it's discreet in your pocket, even just getting the statements being made, the threats being, hurled at you, those are all things that we're going to utilize for what we call probable cause for an arrest. So evidence is awesome. We always need it. We can sometimes, with the advent of all the technology we have, like in our downtown area, we can certainly at least take some of the downtown cameras that we have. We can show body language. We can show, your allegation is that he was, violently swinging things or throwing things. We might pick up on that body language with some of the downtown cameras or business cameras. But with cell phones especially, we have audio, we have visual. The cameras, are typically, super high end in terms of quality. So yes, the answer is, and it's a long-winded answer, but the answer is anytime you have the ability to safely do so, I would encourage someone to do that because it will help us to solve the crime.
I appreciate that information. Now, I'm going to speak from a very human perspective.
Sure.
Sometimes when people, like you say, sticks and stones, call me something super insulting, my instinct is to stand up for myself.
Of course.
So what would you say to that instinct, that we're in public and someone is calling me every slur under the sun, and I have the overwhelming compulsion to tell them to, let's say, go jump in a lake, but let's use very colorful language?
Yes. So I would try to encourage you to not do so. Unfortunately, what's going to happen is that there's almost an obligation to some degree for you to recognize that this person is hurling the insults, but not engage with them to escalate it any further. I will tell you, especially with the city of Middletown, one of the many things that attracts people to the city of Middletown is the services that we have for mental health problems in the community and throughout the state. One of the downsides of that is you sometimes don't know if the person you're engaging with has mental health problems that are even further along than they might be presenting. So by engaging with that person and protecting yourself or sticking up for yourself, while it is a natural instinct, unfortunately, that's not always the best call, because that person could just be, violent and just waiting for that one thing that, kind of strikes their fancy, and now all of a sudden they snap. And I would hate to see that happen to someone. It can also, to some degree, it could kind of minimize it. When you're a victim, you're a victim. But what you want to be is you want to be a credible and above reproach victim. And so kind of re-engaging or hurling insults back Now it's a, the two of you are engaged in mutual combat, whether it's verbal or escalates to, mutual combat physically. We're trying to avoid that altogether. Best bet is to always do what you can to keep your composure. Naturally, instinctually, I get wanting to protect yourself and wanting to stick up for yourself, but keep your composure, walk away, report it as you see fit, and then we can handle it from there. And then you won't get in trouble on the other end either.
So I hear what you're saying is the philosophy of that jerk started it, so I'm going to finish it is not actually appropriate in these situations.
It is not. It's going to feel appropriate at the time, but it is definitely something that could escalate things further, and we're obviously trying to avoid people getting hurt. We're not trying to create circumstances where it actually causes them to get hurt.
So we've been kind of talking about scenarios in which case this happens, like, on a street corner in public. Does this change at all if, say, I'm in a restaurant, a private establishment, and there are people near me who begin insulting me? So now it's in a private establishment, the same behavior starts. Does anything change?
A private establishment, if it's a public restaurant, it's not really considered a private establishment. Like when we think private in terms of the legality of it, we're thinking, residential. We're thinking, even a business can be private if it's not open to the public. So something like in a restaurant would be a public setting. The answer is treating it the same way in the public setting in terms of trying to ignore and or walk away may be appropriate. In that type of setting, I think it would be advantageous to really kind of push the burden to the owners of, we're using the restaurant as the example, right? But push the burden to the owners of the restaurant or the owners of the business to say, hey, I've got customers over here in table 6 who are hurling all of these insults at me. It's really starting to make me uncomfortable. Is there anything that you can do? And ask that they intervene. I would say the vast majority, especially in this city, the vast majority of people will probably end up calling us for that particular situation, which is fine. I'm not discouraging that. But if they take the stance of this is unacceptable on our property, this is unacceptable in our restaurant or our business, they have the legal right to say, you're no longer welcome, not referring to you being the victim of the insult. You're no longer welcome, your behavior is inappropriate, leave our facility. If they leave on their own, while you're probably going to be upset, it's still problem solved. But if they do not leave, then the business or the restaurant will likely go over, get on the phone with us, call us. Now that person is hurling insults, and this is where I kind of getting back to almost full circle with what we started with. This person is hurling insults that may be based on a protected class. Now they're also committing a crime and escalating their behavior to where it is, becoming what we call breach of peace, either violent, tumultuous behavior or, it's like the alarm or et cetera. There's a lot of language that goes into it. But if it's now crossing over or they're refusing to leave, it's now crossed over to a criminal event. Now, that differs a little bit in that the business owner is not required to intervene. The business owner is not required to, stand up on your behalf. They probably will. They want to make sure they have repeat business, but they're not required to. And if they don't, it's probably a business you don't want to frequent in the future anyway. But that being said, it would then be imperative for you to, as long as it's not violent, as long as there's not, if this is just insults, the sticks and stones concept, then it would probably be in your best interest to just pay your tab or, close out your business with the establishment and then walk away, and then pay attention as to whether anything is escalating further that might cross the threshold to a criminal event.
Thank you for that explanation. If there is a concern by a person who contacts like 911 because they feel like they're being threatened during an incident like this, if that person thinks that the responding law officer is disrespectful or unprofessional, what should that person do?
So there's a couple things that they can do, depending upon how formal, and this actually is my particular wheelhouse because this is what we do. There's a few avenues that you can take. If it's, something that maybe there's a disagreement, there's a, the officer wasn't really hearing what I had to say, or it's minimal, right? It's not something that's a direct insult to you. It's just something with, maybe they were a little abrupt. It might be appropriate to just call and ask to talk to a supervisor, express the concern to the supervisor. We have one on the front desk at all times, 24 hours a day. You can express your dislike for what happened with the supervisor. You can explain, all the circumstances. And if you're just looking to have it addressed in an informal manner, the supervisor on the desk can take all of the information from you. Then they will then turn around and they will pull the officer in off the road. They will have the conversation with the officer and kind of, hey, what was going on? Why did this go in this direction? Kind of vet out what it is and then address your concerns. If you'd like it to be a more formal process, and that's really what my specific wheelhouse is, the more formal process is anywhere on the city's website, middletownct.gov. If you find the police page, there's a segment where it's file a complaint against an officer or file a compliment, by the way. I'd like to point out that we also take compliments when they do well. We like to hear those things in addition to. But there is file a complaint against the officer. You can do it online. That goes directly to my email, even though it says professionalstandards@middletownct.gov. It does go directly to me. And in my absence, it goes to my internal affairs investigator. You can do it. You can come into the police station. You can get a copy of the form. The copy of the actual complaint form is also at City Hall, and we have it by policy at the Russell Library as well. So either the online format, the informal phone call to a supervisor, or you can do the actual physical form that you just fill out. And you can fill out, a lot of people have a hard time. They might have a hard time with like reading, writing, comprehension. They might need help with it, so they prefer to have the form itself, and then they can actually have somebody, like myself, help them fill it out, or some family or friend fill it out with them. So there's a lot of avenues to do it. If there's ever a question, if there's ever a concern, the best way to do it is just at least to call the front desk, call the police department, 638-4000, and just, can I talk to a supervisor? No problem. Hey, I'd like to file a complaint against an officer. And then you can file that with the supervisor, and they can actually email you the form if need be. Does that answer your question?
It does.
I will say that one of the things that's going to happen after that, and I guess probably following up with that, what's going to happen after it's received is it comes to me. I vet out the, whether it meets a certain criteria. If it's a generic or generalized, I thought they were brash or I thought they were a little short with me, that might be something that is, we have categories 1 through 4. A category 4 is kind of like a rudeness or something that's just more of a baseline. I just wasn't happy with service. That could be investigated and or delegated out to another division commander, to a shift commander, another lieutenant, or even a sergeant, depending upon if it was appropriate. If it's something that meets, like, say, like a category 1 or a category 2, like it's something that's, against the public interest, against the public trust, that's going to be investigated by my division. Regardless of which direction it goes, the chief of police, by our policy, has to approve it first, which I've yet to see him say no. I mean, if the public is complaining, he wants to know about it. He's very sincere about that. He will approve the complaint, and then he'll let me delegate out as to what division is handling the investigation.
Thank you. I'd like to throw a curveball at you.
Please, by all means.
We've been talking about incidents occurring in what I like to call meat space, AKA the real world. But we spend a lot of our time in virtual social media spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine some of the same rules apply. If there's a person who is just insulting me online, they're just insulting me online, disengage, avoid, ignore. If someone in a social media context, like say Facebook or X or Blue Sky, starts sending me specific threats, saying I am going to hurt you or I am going to attack you, what should I do at that point?
The same thing applies. Obviously, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to attack you, that's a criminal threat. So that's not something that we're even going to question, right? We're going to need to know about it. It needs to be reported. We need to vet out the information as best we can to try to identify who this is. As you know, it sometimes is problematic to identify who the person is. There's a lot of barriers that go into that. But the best thing to do is to report it immediately. I will tell you that that particular scenario you're providing, that's actually like a harassment type of scenario. And the way that the state of Connecticut did it right when they wrote the laws with that harassment can be investigated in the location that it was received or that it was made. So if you as the victim are in the city of Middletown, I encourage you, because it's more convenient for you, right? You live here, you want to go to your local police department, you don't want to have to travel to East Hartford if that's where the suspect lives. You can report it to your local police department, i.e. Middletown if you live in our city, and we investigate it even though the victim, the suspect is committing the harassment crime per se in another town. So it's a convenience thing the state of Connecticut got right. So I would always encourage you to come down and do it. And listen, at the end of the day, even if we're unable to identify who it is, you know, through the normal channels, I would rather know about it and document it and start a paper trail than not know about it at all and have you keep it to yourself and have this be something that down the road, you know, the person making these threats now suddenly just goes off the rails and we've never been aware of them whatsoever. Even if it doesn't lead to an arrest, I'd rather know about it ahead of time.
Thank you. My final question is, do you have anything else you'd like to share on this subject?
I don't. I know a lot. I mean, I guess in the scheme of things, I know that there's a lot that goes back and forth with hateful speech. And it is always problematic or troublesome for someone to have to sit back and be the victim and victimized by that. Try to just imagine, is this just speech that I hate and I'm not fearful, or is this something that is causing me fear because it's also based on, you know, someone's actions as well? I think, and kind of the, you know, obviously the title of the presentation tonight is the space between free speech and hate speech. People have the right, and I can be very crass, as you probably remember, but, you know, people have the right to be assholes. They have the right to be rude and inconsiderate and insensitive. I don't approve of it, but they have a right to do so. It's when that inconsiderate nature or that insensitive nature crosses a threshold and starts to cross into that criminal element to where, you know, I'll use you, Bree, as the example. Now you're in genuine fear for your safety. Exactly, right? You're in genuine fear for your safety. That's when now it becomes a hate crime, not necessarily hate speech. It is a hate crime. And that's where we really want to be involved, and we really want to make sure that we're investigating it.
So I'm just going to restate my understanding of some of the lessons you taught me tonight.
Sure.
If someone is insulting me, regardless of if it's based in bigotry on a protected class or against a protected class, or if it's just they don't like me, or they just don't like me being around, if it's just insults like that, the best thing to do for me is to remove myself from the situation as safely and as quickly as possible. But if I have a fear for myself because they're actually threatening me, they're following me, they're using aggressive body language, they're shaking fists near me, they're encroaching in, they're getting very close to me, at that point, I should still get to safety as soon as possible and then call law enforcement. Correct.
And be prepared to give statements as well. I think that's probably something that gets lost sometimes, that although we're required to record on our body cameras any and all interactions with the public. If you're reporting something to me or reporting it to a patrol officer, he or she should be absolutely recording it at the time. But be prepared to also take the time, if you're reporting it and you want an arrest made, just to be able to give a written statement, because what ends up happening is we take a written statement from you that says all the details and facts and circumstances that you're telling us verbally, but it also ends with a notification that says, I swear, you know, to the best of my knowledge, this is true and accurate, and that you're ending it with, I would like an arrest made when it's appropriate. And that's what can get introduced into court way before the body cam footage might be. So that's something that a state's attorney or a victim's advocate might see ahead of time to say, oh my God, look at this all these egregious things that happened to Bree, you know, on this particular night, we need to do something. That's vetted and seen by a judge, a prosecutor, and a victim's advocate way before body cam footage would be. So just be prepared to spend a little extra time, unfortunately, giving a written statement about it.
Thank you very much for your time tonight, Captain Hubbs. We will be making this available through the Middletown Pride website and through our mailing lists. And I'd like to thank everyone who's either currently participating with us in real time or is watching this in the future. If you have any questions, you can reach Middletown Pride through info@middletownpride.org. And Captain Hutz, do you have a way if people have questions in your role as the public information officer to reach out?
Yes, probably the best way to reach me is via email because I typically get those in my off hours as well, and that's bhubbs@middletownct.gov.
Thank you so much, and I hope you have a lovely night.
You as well. Thanks, Bree.